Alright, now we're going to go on part 2 of the Roaring Twenties, starting with the Jazz Age. The Jazz Age was an interesting type of fade within America's pop culture. This was the first kind of time that dancing and kind of feeding the own heart is starting to come about. The Jazz Age originally was developed within New Orleans, and it was a instant craze. The fashion changed, the women, whenever they started going with the dances, their roles even changed. Something known as marathon dancing became very popular and was actually a huge way that entertainment was developed. This was marathon dancing was literally dancing for hours on end without quitting. Whenever you stopped, you were out of it. More fads. One just kind of interesting one I want to throw on out there. It was something known as flagpole sitting. This was literally when young people would sit for hours and even days on top of a flagpole. The record was 21 days. So this was a kind of an interesting twist and kind of shows you a little bit of what the whole the realm of people, their ideas and their thinking and their source for, their crave for entertainment is really developing. Again, the dance craze is still going on. Other types of dances besides the jazz was known as the Charleston. This was a quick beat type dance, something that y'all I'm sure are a little more familiar with rather than just a slow, easy dancing. Dancers would literally kick out their feet and kind of go to town and start having fun. The popular dance for women this was the Charleston. And this is especially where the flappers would really start to develop their own style of dance and kind of get out there and kind of show the male counterparts of what they actually had. The women who were known as the flappers wore their dress type was a shorter skirts. This was usually to the knees, and that was at this time very risque, you could say. Their dress colors were very bright. Their lipstick was very bright red as well. The haircut was short, as we talked about. It was more of a bob type. They the big thing that they just kind of they wanted to fit in kind of mode. They were very high smokers and drinkers, especially in public. And this is different from women coming out of the time period pre-World War One, where the women were known as the more of the women who didn't do any. They were just kind of the housewife. Obviously they were very anti-drinking with the whole prohibition campaign. They were very distant towards anything like that after World War One, and they started developing more of their own personal types. This is where they start coming of their own kind of thing. This was generally, of course, your younger generation of women, your emerging woman, and they were high smokers, high drinkers. They would get in their Model T cars and go fast in a way that was showing that they were showing other people that they were coming of their own and kind of developing within this time period itself. Some more about the jazz. I want you to know, please take note of this. It was born in New Orleans, created by the African Americans. It was a combination of westward African rhythms, African American songs, and spirituals. Spirituals are more of, you could just say, the church type song, upbeat music. If you've ever gone to more of an upbeat church, you will definitely understand what a spiritual is. It's high energy, high emotions, and really just involved within the song itself. As well, it was kind of a tweak, a spin-off of the European harmonies. Most of jazz actually was very harmonized within each other. Songs such as the heebie-jeebies, it's different rhythms. It's all about rhythm within this time period. Famous jazz musicians are people like Louis Armstrong, Bessie Smith, the Jelly Roll Morton, and there were whole bunches of handfuls of others who were very popular too. But please, for the sake of knowing different things, I want you to at least focus in on Louis Armstrong and Bessie Smith are your two main guys to know about. There was also a new generation of American writers during this time period. Obviously, they were very depressed about the awful experiences throughout World War I. Some of your great writers that are coming in this time period are those who actually witnessed firsthand the war itself. Um, People who outside kind of looking in were criticizing Americans for being obsessed with money and fun. So if you've ever heard of specific writers writing about the Americans, most of it is more of a negative appeal of all this money and fun, when all the other countries are still trying to come out of what happened within the war itself. And especially if you think about it, if you're a European, you're looking at America and you're seeing them, buy all these luscious things, starting the dance age and the jazz and different things, and not necessarily considering what they had just seen. It was it showed to the world of kind of America wasn't too worried about, what was going on. So some of the writings, especially if it's a European writer, they would speak negatively of the Americans. Many writers became expertists. These are people who leave their country to live in a foreign land, and many moved to Europe. They would, develop their writings over Europe, over the different things that they were witnessing, and then write back to the Americas. Some of the great literature from this time period is something like The Great Gatsby, where it shows where the Great Gatsby within the novel, it's about partying and having fun, but there was this a core moral that people needed to realize. Some of the specifically the writers, one was Ernest Hemingway. He wrote about the experiences, but he was a big guy of speaking about World War I in Europe. Probably one of the best selling novels is his A Farewell to Arms. This is speaking of World War I and kind of wrapping it up as he saw it. The Sun Also Rises, The Old Man and the Sea. These are all different novels that were mirroring World War I in Europe itself. Then we go to F. Scott Fitzgerald. He wrote about the wealthy young people. So this was your young people emerging, seeking to create wealth and fame within their country. And this is, again, like I mentioned before, The Great Gatsby, it was his writing, and it characterized the flappers, the bootleggers, the movie makers, and the emerging class, and the type of people that are emerging during this time period itself. Sinclair Lewis, he was more of your Main Street, your Babbitt kind of writer. He, sucks to more of the city slick and looking things. He wrote books about rural people from a city person's perspective. He is kind of known as the writer who was making other people look stupid. Yeah. Then we go to something known as the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a time period throughout the 1920s. If you want to actually think more a little before this, I would recommend it to whenever, the Harlem Renaissance developed out of the Great Migration, which was the time period where blacks moved north in search of factory jobs and different kind of, opportunity that they didn't have down south. Many African Americans, mainly from your Georgia, your South Carolina, North Carolina, were the ones that settled down in Harlem, New York. In Harlem, we had black artists, musicians, and writers that celebrated their African American heritage, and they began to develop it within a realm of itself, and kind of create their own type of culture and fame in the city. Here's some different kind of drawings and pictures of the Harlem Renaissance, and during this time period, especially the arts, they developed something known as realism. Realism is more of it's when you have a picture and it looks like you're there. So it was kind of, as you're there type of drawings. Some of your famous poets was Claude McKay. He was a Jamaican. He was a big speaker of the lynchings. You had Courtney Cullen. He taught at high school in Harlem. He spoke greatly of the experiences of the African Americans, and Courtney Cullen is a great guy that we receive so much of the information about the Harlem Renaissance through his writings of poetry within his high schools in Harlem itself. Langston Hughes, He was the most well-known of the Harlem Renaissance poets. He wrote many plays, short stories, and essays. His famous first poem was "The Negro Spirits of the River." He encouraged African Americans to be proud of their heritage and not, withdraw from their heritage to fit into the emerging society, but rather create their own society with the emerging society as well. And through his writings and through the readings, it helped flourish the Harlem Renaissance. He protested against racism. We're still dealing with the racism at this point. The KKK is emerging back again. They have yet to die out this time period. The NAACP is another. They're still forming, still trying to get things that they need. Here is one of Langston Hughes' poems. You can pause it. You can read it now. Some of the heroes of the 1920s. These are athletes like Bobby Jones, Jack Dempsey, Bill Tilden, Gertrude Ed these are amazing athletes that were defying the time period itself as being African American and an athlete. Babe Ruth, he was one of the greatest known baseball players. This is, again, a merging of this time period. This time period is changing from working at the home, developing, always trying to do something better, to more of an entertainment type society. They want to enrich their lives through entertainment. Babe Ruth was a great one in baseball. He grew up in an orphanage. He was a very troubled boy, but yet when he found his own, this was, again, a time period of finding one's true meaning, and when he found his true meaning in baseball, he became known as one of the greatest ever. Charles Lindbergh, the greatest hero of the 1920s, was probably one of the greatest heroes, as I said, in the 20s. He was the first person to fly an airplane across the Atlantic Ocean by himself. He flew from New York to Paris. His plane was called the Lucky Lindy. Please take note of the importance that Charles Lindbergh had on society because now we are actually seeing the opportunity that technology can develop for us, and then we can use these airplanes to travel to different countries. We had the Model T. We're traveling around the Americas. Now we have this opportunity of emerging that airplanes can go across the water, and they're not used solely for, transporting mail, going around circus, but more of a different type of way that we can use and highly effectively use technology that we've emerged from the war, such as the airplanes. That's it for right now. I want y'all to just kind of go back through this PowerPoint and really take note of the different areas. You have the Great Migration, the government changes, how every president during the 1920s is a Republican. What were those changes that they developed? The Ohio Gang and different things like that. And also take note of the different emerging and changes of society and how, we're going to the movies, we're learning about the radios, the airplanes, the Model T. So much different things are changing within the 20s that you please need to take note of, and don't forget to do your review. Continue to work hard and keep looking, and hope you